Writing emerged very late in human history. But the absence of writing doesn't mean our ancestors lived in a world empty of memory. They built complex systems to store meaning on eggshells, bone fragments, rock faces, and within their recurring rituals themselves. Writing systems, as we know them, are a remarkably recent invention. They appeared just over 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, a mere blink in the timeline of our species. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, with brain structures identical to our own, had already roamed Earth for 300,000 years. This immense time gap often creates a significant problem of perception. We tend to mistakenly assume the pre-literate world was a dark void of forgetfulness, a time when vital survival information simply washed away with each generation. Yet, the reality of survival for our Stone Age ancestors demanded a vast and intricate body of knowledge. It couldn't rely solely on individual short-term memory. A band of hunter-gatherers needed to precisely recall the migration routes of large animal herds through every season. They had to locate underground springs that never ran dry during the arid months, mark out invisible territorial boundaries with rival groups, and adhere to countless core marriage rules and taboos to maintain social order. These were all critical pieces of information. The human brain, sophisticated as it is, still has biological limits on its storage capacity and how quickly it retrieves information, especially under the pressures of a harsh environment. So, very early on, our ancestors were forced to externalize their memory, to move it outside their own bodies. They transformed the physical world around them into an external repository, a durable, purposeful store for collective memory. This documentary, then, is not a search for the origins of writing, nor for the first alphabets. Instead, it's an exploration of pre-literate mechanisms, a cognitive archaeological journey. It examines how our ancestors used flexible, non-linguistic tools to remember, to count, to communicate, to recreate things not immediately present. And by doing so, they sustained the very lifeblood of their communities. The concept of meaning storage here encompasses a broad range of deliberate actions that didn't necessarily require a complete grammar or a fixed vocabulary. When a prehistoric person created a mechanism for their descendants to read a warning or to recognize a natural pattern, that was the core act of defying the erosion of time. It affirms that long before writing, humanity were already masters at managing information essential for survival. Yet, calling our ancestors masters of information management requires great caution. In cognitive archaeology, drawing a clear line is vital to avoid romanticizing the past. Not every mark left by humans is writing, and not every image carries a linguistic message. A scratch on a rock face, for instance, might simply be a mark from sharpening a tool, or just an unconscious doodle made while waiting. It might not represent any complex idea at all. This field demands a sober, clear-headed approach, refusing to force meaning onto every single trace. We must accept that many ancient marks will simply remain silent to us because they were never intended to speak. So, where do we draw that line between a simple mark and actual writing? The origin of writing, under its strictest definition, is linked to the emergence of an encoded system. This system must have clear rules, whether grammatical or syntactical, and be able to represent the sounds or meanings of a particular language. Most importantly, it allows someone who never knew the author, perhaps even centuries later, to accurately decipher the message simply by understanding those rules. This demands a high level of standardization and broad acceptance within a given cultural group. Writing isn't just a personal symbol, it's a social protocol. In contrast, pre-writing signs, these ancient mnemonic systems, worked quite differently. They relied heavily on their specific physical and social context. An Ishango bone, for example, with its parallel notches, might have been a counting tool, perhaps a lunar calendar, or an early calculation device. It certainly helped its creator remember a quantity or a specific cycle. But on its own, it can't tell us if that quantity referred to the number of prey, the days of the full moon, or the members of a tribe. We'd need a direct explanation from its original owner. In these cases, the mark is simply a memory aid, a tool to support thought, not an independent text capable of conveying complex information on its own. It's similar with the images found in cave art or the geometric patterns on those 60,000-year-old deep-cloth eggshell fragments from South Africa. These are certainly expressive, and they might tell a story, perhaps a hunt, a ritual, or even an early mental map of a landscape. They could represent some abstract concept held within a tribe's collective memory. Yet, they are not arranged in a linear sequence to create a full sentence with a clear subject and predicate. Each image stands as a distinct unit of information, visually powerful but grammatically discrete. They are flexible memory techniques, serving very specific, immediate purposes for a small group. This clear distinction isn't meant to diminish the value of these ancient signs, quite the opposite, in fact. It helps us truly appreciate their incredible diversity, ingenuity, and sheer practicality. Instead of trying to force a piece of bone or a stone slab into the role of an ancient book, we need to see them for what they really were: localized solutions for survival, discrete pieces in humanity's grand, millennia-long effort to overcome the limits of our biological memory. To understand these local solutions better, let's journey now to a pivotal site in cognitive archaeology, the Deep Kloof rock shelter in South Africa. This isn't a magnificent cave with grand animal paintings, nor a tomb filled with treasures. Instead, it's a simple rock shelter, a stopping point for ancient hunter-gatherers. And it offers some of the most authentic, compelling evidence for how our ancestors stored information directly onto their survival tools. At Deep Kloof, scientists have unearthed over 270 ostrich eggshell fragments dating back some 60,000 years. What's remarkable is that these fragments are covered in intricate geometric patterns, deliberately carved. This wasn't random. It suggests a sophisticated, ancient system for storing knowledge. What makes the Diepkloof eggshells stand out from so many other prehistoric artifacts is their sheer practicality. These weren't sacred ritual objects or simple adornments. In the semi-arid landscape of the African continent, where water was scarce and unevenly distributed, a hollow ostrich egg became a cutting-edge technological innovation. Light, durable, able to hold up to a liter of water, they were the perfect portable containers. They allowed groups to traverse lands devoid of rivers or streams. These vessels were a lifeline, a vital tool for survival during long migrations or extended hunts. And it was on these essential items that people began to etch meaning. The carvings on the eggshells weren't random or simply decorative. Detailed analysis of their surfaces reveals repeating motifs, parallel lines, intersecting cross-hatched bands forming trapezoids, or even ladder-like patterns. More importantly, archaeologists discovered specific design rules. These were strictly followed, maintained consistently across thousands of years. Such standardization over such a long period is undeniable evidence. These patterns carried a specific informational meaning. They were understood by the entire community. It formed an encoded collective memory. These were not the spontaneous scribbles of an individual. No, they were a tradition, passed from generation to generation, a form of early proto-writing. This combination, an essential survival tool and a system of geometric symbols, opened up a remarkably efficient mechanism for storing meaning. Imagine a group of people stopping at a waterhole. They set down their eggshell containers to collect water. How would they tell whose container was whose, or which belonged to which group? The carved patterns on the eggshells could have served as personal ownership tags, or perhaps more significantly, as identifiers for a clan, a tribe. A specific motif might be your group's logo, distinguishing your property from strangers. They could even carry information about what was held inside. One pattern might indicate water from a reliable source, another old water or other liquid. Here, a water container went far beyond its purely physical function. It took on an additional social, informational role. The Diepkloof discovery shatters a long-held prejudice. The idea that ancient symbol systems only appeared on ritual objects or in spaces separate from daily life, like cave art. It powerfully demonstrates that, as far back as 60 millennia ago, humans were integrating information codes into their most basic tools and daily activities. Identifying your group's water container in the desert wasn't just about property. It was the fine line between life and death. In that context, the symbols carved on the eggshells were not decorative art. They were a sharp survival tool, a non-verbal means of communication, one that helped shape the very origins of writing. The need to remember went beyond just names or places. It also faced a more abstract challenge: tracking numbers. As human societies developed, managing time, resources, and natural cycles became essential. The Ishango bone, found in the Democratic Republic of Congo and dated to around 20,000 years ago, is a prime example of how the pre-literate world recorded quantities. This unique artifact, among the oldest mathematical evidence ever found, opens a new chapter in the story of writing's origins, a chapter dedicated to numbers themselves. This artifact is a section of a baboon fibula with a quartz crystal shard embedded at one end, likely used for carving marks. However, the real focus lies in the 3 parallel rows of notches deliberately carved along the bone's shaft. Immediately, this arrangement sparks countless theories, but it's crucial to maintain a clear perspective. We must avoid exaggerated, sensational interpretations, claims that this was the first computer, a complex lunar calendar, or evidence that early humans understood prime numbers. While the groups of marks do show interesting totals, one column has groups of 11, 13, 17, 19. Another has 9, 19, 21, 11. The perspective of cognitive archaeology is more grounded. Archaeology focuses on the artifact's most fundamental and certain purpose, a tallying tool. It's a classic example of an ancient record-keeping system where function outweighed apparent complexity. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of hunter-gatherers 20,000 years ago. Storing a sequence of abstract numbers in your head for long periods was incredibly risky and inefficient. Human memory is easily distorted. They needed a reliable method to know how many days had passed since the last full moon, how many prey a hunting party had brought back, or to track menstrual cycles to calculate the clan's fertility. In that context, the Ishango bone acted as an external memory, a physical tool designed specifically for numerical data. It was an external memory aid, freeing up the brain's capacity from the burden of remembering monotonous counting sequences. This left mental energy for more complex tasks like planning or problem-solving. When a prehistoric person made a mark on the bone corresponding to a single unit, whether a day, an animal, or a repeating event, they were making a cognitive leap. This action established a one-to-one correspondence between a real-world object or concept and an artificial physical mark. This was abstraction at a high level. The act of carving stripped away all specific characteristics of the object being counted: its color, size, sound, shape, location. A large antelope and a small berry, when counted, both became an identical notch. Only its numerical value remained. So, an artifact like the Ishango bone doesn't need to be a sophisticated mathematical device to be considered great. Its value isn't in prime numbers or doubling calculations that some researchers have speculated about. Its greatness lies in the fundamental idea itself. Humans realized memory could be tricked by time. So, they actively created a carving tool to anchor numbers to the physical world. This act was a giant stepping stone for managing reality, laying the cognitive foundation for later trade, property division, and time management, pillars that would shape future civilizations. Beyond mere numbers, another kind of memory, far more complex, richer in context, was stored on an infinitely grander scale: the cave walls themselves. At famous sites like Chauvet in France or Sulawesi in Indonesia, images of animals often captivate us. Modern eyes tend to frame them as early artworks, simple aesthetic expressions. But from a cognitive archaeology perspective, this label of pure art can obscure their true fundamental purpose. Strip away that artistic veneer. What we see then are vast visual records, ancient memory systems. Meaning is stored here, woven into the shapes, the context, and the surrounding space. This is a form of pre-textual visual language. It records the world not through abstract symbols, but through its own direct imagery. Before humans had written words to describe an animal's shape, its size, or its behavior, all that vital biological and ecological information was compressed. It lay within lines drawn with charcoal or red ochre. When an individual in the community depicted a herd of wild horses galloping, a wounded bison, or a lion stalking its prey, they weren't simply sketching. They were performing an act. They were preserving an objective truth about the natural world, fixing it onto a static surface. A fleeting moment transformed into a lasting piece of information. That image became a unit of knowledge. Others in the group could access it, understand it, even long after the original artist was gone. The memory function of this cave imagery becomes clearest when we observe the meticulous attention to anatomical detail. The posture of an animal, its precise proportions, the curve of a bull's horn, the rippling muscles on a horse's shoulder, the distinctive stance of a fleeing beast. These aren't just random displays of skill. They are visual field guides, powerful teaching tools. They helped young hunters identify prey, predict movements, understand herd structure, and grasp critical physical traits. Learning through these images was far safer than confronting real dangers in the field. This practice strengthened the collective understanding of their ecosystem. It ensured vital knowledge could pass down through countless generations. Crucially, where these images were placed on the cave walls was no accident. Prehistoric people deliberately leveraged the natural topography of the cave itself. A horse drawn on a bulging section of rock might mimic its full, rounded belly. A leopard placed within a dark recess could represent its hiding behavior. This arrangement transformed the cave into an interactive storage space. It subtly engaged spatial memory. Three-dimensional relationships were recreated between hunter and prey, between different animal species, and between creatures and the landscape. The flickering light of a torch sweeping across these uneven surfaces would have made the drawings seem to move. They reenacted the very moments of the hunt. Thus, the images on the rock walls were a way to fix the fleeting movements and fragile existence of the wild world into something eternal. They allowed people to grasp and hold the essence of things, even when the actual creature was not present. Through these drawings, Paleolithic humans built a profound archive of reality, a vast store of knowledge. This ensured that critical understanding of their environment would never vanish with the limited memory of a single individual. Unlike modern human thought, which relies on text and flat maps on paper or digital screens, prehistoric people used the very structure of their physical environment as a vast storage system. For them, space wasn't an abstract concept reduced to coordinates. It was a living entity, a landscape library. The environment wasn't just a place to live, it functioned as an ancient memory system. Each mountain, riverbend, or unique rock carried layers of vital survival information. This was a kind of pre-writing scaled across the entire landscape, where knowledge wasn't recorded on small surfaces but deeply carved into the earth itself. Instead of drawing a map, hunter-gatherer groups anchored geographical memory in oral stories, tightly linked to specific spatial landmarks. A strangely shaped rock, for instance, wasn't just an inert mineral block. It could be the marker for a groundwater source that would appear during the dry season, encoded within the tail of a thirsty, sacred antelope using its horns to strike the rock and find life-giving water. That same rock might also define an inviolable territorial boundary, reinforced by a legend of a great battle fought right there. In this way, abstract information, like borders or seasonal water sources, became tied to a physical, tangible object. This made remembering and passing on knowledge far easier and more enduring. This spatial memory technique, in essence, was a large-scale version of the memory palace method we know today, but applied across an entire territory. It worked by attaching information to be remembered to a real physical route. When elders guided younger generations along a traditional migratory path, the journey itself became a dynamic transfer of information. Every bend, every slope, every patch of forest became a chapter in an oral geographical book. The geographical landscape served as physical hooks to hang collective memory upon. This ensured information retrieval was precise, following the exact spatial sequence the route demanded, a critical factor for survival when moving through the wild. Many ancient myths and legends, when analyzed through the lens of cognitive archaeology, have revealed surprisingly detailed navigational or terrestrial routes. By transforming a complex route into a story with characters, drama, and a rhythm that mirrored the terrain's features, a steep slope became a hero's challenge, a river fork a fateful choice. Humans created a sustainable, internalized GPS map within the collective mind. This system was resilient against information distortion across generations, as stories were simply easier to remember and retell accurately than a dry list of directions. Expanding the concept of storing meaning beyond portable objects like the deep-cloth eggshells or the Ishango bone reveals a significant evolutionary step in synthetic thinking and the very origins of proto-writing. When the starry night sky guided navigation and the rugged daytime ground became endless scrolls recording routes, humans had fully dissolved their information system into the natural world. This wasn't mysticism. Instead, it was an incredibly effective cognitive strategy. It made collective memory robust and immortal as long as the surrounding physical landscape remained intact. In essence, it transformed the entire world into a vast external storage for the human brain. If bones or cave walls hold static information, then ritual acts as the mechanism for preserving and passing on dynamic knowledge. From the perspective of cognitive archaeology, we need to shed the religious and mystical layers. This allows us to see ritual as a rigorous tool for social communication, an ancient system designed to encode information into human actions and the human body itself. These weren't vague, mystical rites. They were early, vibrant, and incredibly effective versions of a shared memory. Instead of being stored on an object, this information was etched directly into the community's behavior, becoming part of its collective memory. In essence, ritual is the patterned repetition of specific behaviors, following a sequence that is almost impossible to change. This extreme, repeated adherence isn't a sign of blind superstition. It was, in fact, a sophisticated way to correct errors, a mechanism for transmitting vital information across generations. Without written laws, how could a survival rule, a critical social agreement, or a taboo remain untainted after just 3 generations? Our ancestors' solution was simple. Every member had to perform the action identically at the same time during every cycle. Any deviation from that established pattern would be immediately detected and corrected by the entire community, ensuring the social data stayed whole. The most crucial social survival knowledge was embedded right within the ritual's unfolding. Who was permitted to lead the hunt? Who had the right to touch sacred tools? Who could recount the tribe's origin story? Rules governing hierarchy, property, and the division of labor weren't written down. They were performed. They were enacted. They were carved into the collective consciousness through the powerful physical experience of the body. Instead of reading a written code, prehistoric people learned these laws by taking part in a dance, a ceremonial procession, or a communal meal strictly apportioned by rank. This knowledge became tangible and alive in every single gesture. This system worked with astonishing effectiveness. The rhythmic drums, the repeated chants, the synchronized body movements, and a space set apart from everyday life, all combined to create a state of intense focus. This would stimulate the release of neurotransmitters, significantly boosting the brain's long-term memory capacity. Intense emotion and shared experience within the ritual acted like a powerful glue, binding knowledge firmly to individual neural networks. In this way, ritual served as the society's deep programming. Unwritten rules were not just learned, they were ingrained directly into the consciousness of every participant, without a single word ever needing to be written down. Through this method, social memory didn't simply lie dormant within an object that could be lost, stolen, or destroyed. Instead, it survived. It moved continuously from one generation to the next, carried within living bodies. Memory transformed into action, and that action, in turn, ensured the survival of the community's entire body of knowledge. What emerged was a distributed, self-recovering, and incredibly resilient archive. This was an outstanding solution to the fundamental challenge of storing and passing on vital knowledge in a world before writing existed. Looking back, we realize that when the first writing systems emerged in Sumer or Egypt, they weren't dropped into a void of human understanding. The origin of writing wasn't a miracle. It was a natural progression. It inherited a vast legacy from the history of pre-writing systems, from carving patterns, counting on Ishango bones, painting images inside caves, remembering landscapes with spatial memory, and performing repeated rituals. What writing truly brought wasn't inventing the capacity to store memory externally from scratch. Instead, it standardized, solidified, and disciplined human capabilities that were already there. In ancient memory systems, information was always tied directly to the speaker, the context, and physical objects. A simple mark on a bone only held meaning if the hunter who made it still remembered what it represented. Writing broke that dependency. It allowed information to exist entirely independent of its creator, so a stranger living centuries later could still understand it precisely. This discipline also became a new tool for managing power. When the flexible collective memory of a community, once maintained through oral tradition or mental maps, was replaced by fixed legal clay tablets, control over truth shifted. It moved from the elders, the storytellers, to an elite group who could read and write. Writing expanded human memory infinitely, but it also made it more vulnerable to manipulation by state structures. Despite this, pre-writing techniques were never completely eradicated. Even today, we still use objects to express identity. We rely on spatial memory to find our way. We use rituals to reinforce family rules. The journey from physical marks, numbers, images, and space to action still flows beneath our polished written texts. Consider this. How do you store your most important memories? Are they all in written form? Or are they still connected to specific objects, spaces, and actions? If you're intrigued by the complexity of our ancestors' minds, explore more cognitive archaeology sites like the Deep Kloof rock shelter, where engraved ostrich eggshells were found. Understanding this world is a crucial step. It helps us recognize the next turning point, the shift from simply recording physical marks to creating symbols that don't exist in nature at all. That was the dawn of true abstraction. It's the subject of our next episode, the first abstractions.